Okay. Hi. Hello. I'm not amplified. This mic is for the live stream. We're live streaming on YouTube. So hi again. I'm Jamie. I'm the organizer of both GlasgowJS and Edinburgh.js. We've got two great speakers lined up for you tonight. In fact, and a third little kind of rocket pitch for something. If you're interested in Edinburgh.js, we're running that next week, next Tuesday. Check the meetup group and do check out scottishtechnology.club, where I list loads of tech events that are happening across Scotland, bulletins, like if people send me jobs, I try and post them there. So do check that out. Sorry that there isn't that much room. There's one more seat, so if anybody sitting next door who can hear this wants a seat right at the front, you're welcome to come through. Thank you to Jack and Barclays for picking us up today, the venue and the pizza. We really appreciate that. And thank you to Glasgow City Council, who have given some money for the drinks this evening. So, yep, they'll see this in the live stream when I send the video to them, and give them a round of applause. Cool. Okay, so our first speaker who will be speaking about building full stack apps is Ryan. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you very much. This has been live streamed and there's so many of you here tonight, so I'm super excited. My talk tonight is probably not as technical as the other two guys, but I'm hoping that it'll resonate with you. I'm talking about building full stack applications and products, but I'm going to talk about some of the non-technical aspects about that, some of the business considerations you might make, some of the lessons I've learned along the way, and maybe we'll have a bit of a discussion at the end because I haven't actually timed how long this talk is, so we'll see how that goes. But without further ado, I'll jump right into it. Really, the first thing is being a generalist is a skill in itself. We all focus on having specific skill sets. You know, people categorize themselves as a front-end developer, a back-end developer, a DBA, or something, a tester, whatever. But I'm going to kind of come at this from a different angle and propose that we look at things as a broader spectrum. So I'm assuming most of you are familiar with this quote, "A jack of all trades is a master of none." But show of hands, does anyone know the full quote for this, the real quote for this? Right, this has made my point fantastic. I was worried that you were all going to put your hands up there and it'd be an absolute killer. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Now, that really is the premise of my talk today and my view on just software development, your job, your life, to be honest, right? I like it to be as diverse as possible. A few people that are here, like Stephen, he always winds me up because I say too many quotes, so that is actually the only one that I've got today. But essentially, we view being a generalist as a negative thing, as according to that quote, right? It's a negative thing if you're not a master in one specific thing, but I challenge that and actually say that it's the exact opposite. So for me, my experience has been working as a full stack developer from the very early days. It was always where my ambition lied because I loved the idea of being able to take something from an idea, build the front end, the back end, the database, connect it all up and actually go, I've made this thing. It wasn't quite tangible, but it was as close to tangible as you could get in the software development space. So that's basically where this is going. So we'll see what the next slide is, try and remember. Yeah, so right off the bat, again, I know when I start talking about a lot of this stuff, you'll probably wince at me when I say some of these things, right? But just stick with me because the sentiment is there. Everyone thinks about stacks and they argue about things, right? So this is going to be a bit of a journey from full stack development, solution architecture. I'm going to finish up at product at the end of the meeting or whatever you want to call it. Clearly, I'm on Teams too often. But whenever you're choosing a stack, how many of you actually have been at the beginning of a product or a new solution and you've been involved in this, like choosing the stack? Show of hands. Right, so maybe a bit, half of you, maybe a bit less than half of you, right? So a lot of people, whenever they get involved in this at the beginning, right, is the first thing they'll think about is, well, what's the most exciting technology out there? It might be Remix.js, it might be Dino because it's out and it's not actually out a preview yet, and everyone goes, oh, that's 10 times quicker than the stuff that's actually out there, right? But what I'm going to talk to you about is, right, when you have to live with those decisions in 2 years' time, how you might think about them differently. So a lot of you probably have been in this room arguing about whether you should use React or Vue.js or Angular or whether you should use C# or hopefully not PHP. I might wince if you say that. But essentially, you'll all have these discussions about it, but fundamentally my challenge to you here today is to take a zoom out of that and actually think about what it is you're solving, and actually if you can get out of the minutiae and focus on the higher level, you'll suddenly see that as much as these decisions are important, we probably spend too much time thinking about them, and actually we should focus more on the problems we're solving, who we're solving them for, and how we get there. Some of the pitfalls I've already really mentioned, to be honest with you, right? So choosing something like a Remix.js, I'm just choosing that as an example. I've never even used it. It's just that I see it in like Fireship.io videos, if you watch that channel. If not, very good one to watch. But if you try to go hire a team when you start scaling out a team, and you have to hire a team of engineers, if you put out a CV, I mean, again, I'm sure that a lot of you, show of hands, how many people have been involved in the hiring process. So again, maybe a lot less actually that time. Whenever you get to that position, when you're right at the beginning of actually being involved in these projects, it's very easy to get excited and say, I want to use this technology, I want to use that. But whenever it's 6 months, 12 months, 24 months down the line and you're trying to scale a team and no one knows how to use that technology, suddenly that becomes a very difficult decision to make. And it's not things that people think about because they get carried away with the shiny object syndrome, if you will. So what I would suggest you do is actually you look at, you can actually look up online, like I'm sure you've all done this with GitHub, like starred repos and all the rest of it. But go look at like what people are actually using. So a lot of people, let's be honest, they'll use React. But people that use Vue.js, Angular and stuff, that's fine. They're still pretty high up, repositories and all the rest of it. But if you can get more demand of React developers, it's probably a really good business decision to choose that stack. Whether or not you think Vue.js might have a 10% efficiency gain or whatever it might be, when you think about these other perspectives, these things will come into play. Similarly, with your back-end technology stack, so a lot of people, there's a very specific, I forget them, MERN, mean stacks, all the rest of it, but there's a reason why people stick with a consistent setup, and it's because quite often the people that learn about that learn about the rest of them, and again, it's easier to hire. So just a few non-technical considerations to think about. You'll see that as a wee bit of a theme throughout this, but just not to be always focused on the technical when you're starting these things. Now, I'll give you some examples of things that I've learned this the hard way on. Now, GraphQL, I'm sure a lot of you have used. I love GraphQL. I was like preaching about GraphQL to everyone I know. I've got someone in the room who was actually a bit of a mentor to me on GraphQL, who I'll give a wee shout out to. He knows where he is. Helped me a lot with it, actually. It was really nice to see him tonight. And I basically took that into the next company that I went to and actually implemented the similar stack. Fantastic for a front-end application, but the problem that I didn't consider when I was at the beginning stages building out that back end of the system was that in 2 years down the line, we were going to integrate with third-party systems. And what do you know? The companies that we're integrating with might be, let's be a bit older, maybe not as modern, and them integrating with GraphQL was a bit of a nightmare because they're only used to dealing with REST APIs. Now, this is something I wouldn't have thought about until maybe someone like myself tonight would tell me this. You don't think about that. You just think, I'm going to use GraphQL. Again, sorry I'm asking hands, but I like to just get a gauge of the room. How many people have used GraphQL? Yeah, again, maybe about 50%. So I'll try and give a quick description of it, and hopefully the people that have used it don't, shout me out. But GraphQL, best way to think about it, REST APIs, you'll get your CRUD endpoints, create, I always forget, create, read, update, delete, whatever it is. GraphQL basically gives you queries and mutations. Queries are just getting information, mutations are just putting information up, is a nice way to think about it. But the main premise of GraphQL is it allows you to over and under fetch. So with REST APIs, essentially you would have to create loads of endpoints for get person, get person's hair color, get person's eye color. With GraphQL, you can just create a get person endpoint and add to it through time, and everyone that's consuming that endpoint can use and pull the data that they want for it. So that was the selling point that I used it on. I thought it was fantastic, saved us a lot of time, made our front-end development a lot quicker. But down the line, when we started to use it for third-party integrations, it's been a bit of a headache, and actually I would go, oh my God, it probably would have been easier to do an open API spec. So again, this is an example of one of those things that don't just think about the technology, think about the customers you're going to appeal to in 6, 12, 24 months' time. Think about the direction of the business, the way it wants to go. And if you don't know the direction that's going to go, speak to the business. Speak to them about who their ideal customers are. It's not your job to know that. But one of the big things as technical people in the company is it's our job not to do exactly what the company asks. It's our job to interpret what they want and provide the best solution. And for a lot of you that are maybe at the early stages of your career, that's something that sounds a little bit alien, because you kind of go, well, my boss has told me to, build a car. Why would I build them? How do I know whether to build them a Ferrari or a four-wheel drive car? We need to ask questions. You need to be inquisitive. You need to find out what they're actually trying to achieve down the line, and that's exactly what will help you with. Another little call out to a specific type of technology. I don't know if this person will end up watching the video, but there's a guy that I work with who's probably hands down the best engineer I've ever worked with in my life thus far. And he basically introduced us to a technology called temporal.io. Now, for those of you, again, who are starting out doing your full stack development, you're doing your React, your Redux, you're maybe dabbling a little bit in TypeScript, you might get experience with it if you're on a back end, if you're dealing with like workflow managements or queues or stuff like that. But Temporal basically is a workflow management tool that allows you to essentially schedule jobs in a super easy asynchronous way. Now, if I was to build a new piece of software, I guarantee most of you would build out the front end, the back end, database, and whenever you click a button on the app, you send a request and you forget about it. And maybe some of you are thinking, well, how else do you do it? Right? Like, how else does that work? You just send it and it works, doesn't it? Like, the internet's really consistent. We never have any issues with that. So obviously that's not true. So that's exactly where we pull things in, such as workflow engines. Now, I wish that was something I knew about back at the beginning of my career, because whenever you add it in later on, you realize, oh my God, the different use cases for it. Now, workflow management system really is just a way of saying, instead of you sending the job out into the ether and hoping for the best, you basically add it to a queue that will have retries, so that if your customers, for example, when they're using your system, let's just say, you know, I don't know, your Lambda function breaks down, or your Azure function, whatever it might be, or whatever your storage is down for whatever reason, or just the internet has just had a flaky and it dropped a few packets. Whatever that might be, Temporal is able to then say, well, I'll retry it, and it'll do a thing called exponential backoff, if I remember correctly, where it'll basically retry and it'll go up in an exponential time difference, where it'll try it 1 second, go up the exponential pattern. But essentially what that gives you is robustness for your system. So you're not going to have customers coming back and going, well, the app gets stuck in this in-between state because you fire and forget and it never was able to get back to it. So really, really something I would consider, right? And these are just little golden nuggets that people have shared with me, so hopefully they're beneficial to people. Config first. Who actually knows what I mean by config first? Some of you might wince when I say this. Like, does anyone have a guess of what I mean by config first? I mean, honestly, I wish everyone was like, you're clearly not as excited as I am here, by the way. We need to get a bit of energy in the room. But no, config first, I mean, whenever we're all developing, it's so easy to do a quick version of it and go, I'll hard code this, I'll come back and do it later. Litter the code with to-do statements, I'll come back and fix it at a later date. The best thing I have learned now is to spend the time and do config first. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to build a class about cars, don't hard code everything into it, make it config driven, because once you actually deal with these businesses and you deal with different people, owners of businesses, clients, the next thing they're going to 9 times out of 10 come back to you and say is, well, I'd like the Ferrari, I'd like the Land Rover, I'd like this. And if you've hard-coded everything to be a Ferrari, the business just assumes, as I was saying earlier, because you don't do what the business asks, you interpret what the business needs and you provide the best solution for it. Part of that is that you have to make the assumption that they're going to ask you different things. You need to be careful not to prematurely optimize things. That's another separate topic, and there's a fine balance between it. But essentially, you want to be going config first. You want to get to the position where you can just drop in the variables and say, bang, there's a new car for you. Now, that might seem obvious for maybe the more experienced people in here, but I know we've got a mixed crowd, and I think these are really nice little nuggets of gold. Scalability is an interesting one. Scalability, you could have an argument on both ends of this. Scalability, you could be going, actually, I want to deal with for 10 million users. Really, if you're actually only get 10 users, you don't need to solve for 10 million users, but you have to think about it. You have to think about your server sizes. Again, I'm going to talk about full stack experience. I'm going to talk through some specific subjects that I'll come back to on that. And coding standards and linters, I'm not going to talk about a lot. I'm sure you all know what they are, but just put them in. The amount of arguments that will save you having with everyone because you prefer calling a variable this and they prefer doing it like this and I prefer a semicolon here. Just put them in from day one. You will avoid so many arguments, trust me. And I'm sure Alan's smiling because he knows what I'm talking about. Now, the next one. I mean, these all might sound a bit daft, or maybe they're a bit obvious. They weren't to me. Whiteboards. The stuff on the board doesn't actually have any significance. I just thought it looked nicer than writing the word whiteboard. It's really just the way that... So one of the big things that I think suffered whenever we've went remote is that we don't use whiteboards. And this might sound mental to people, right? But see, whenever you're on calls and you're talking to your peers and you're talking to your colleagues, right? So basically that's dead easy. You don't even need to understand this. I've got a user up the front. They're using Active Directory. I go to the front end. I authenticate to the back end using Microsoft Authentication. And I've got a few connections out to my back end database. Easy, right? But if I was to try and describe that to someone without a visual representation, it's so bloody confusing. And people just take it for granted. And especially technical people, we assume everyone else sometimes understands things the way we do. And we'll explain it and think they've got that same mental representation in their mind, which is just not the case. So I would encourage you all genuinely, right? And what I will say is you will get the piss taken out of you because I use a whiteboard in almost every meeting and everyone just does not stop moaning about it. But you can get a wee Wacom tablet for about 50 quid, and I guarantee you when you're doing design sessions, it will make the world of a difference. And I'd actually love it if you've all used one and you sent me your whiteboards just so I can see them, because it's genuinely, it makes such a difference. But people are afraid to do it. People are afraid to take that ownership in a meeting, take that decision and go, this is what we're doing. I'd encourage every single one of you in this. I've had a few people talking to me tonight about experience. How do I do this? How do I do that? And I've said to you what I said to them. You do it by just doing it. If you're scared, do it scared. It doesn't matter. Every single one of you in the room, I don't know any more about this than you. I'm sure there's a lot of people sitting here tonight that are going, I know all these things. And unfortunately, that might be the case for some of you, but a lot of people in the room don't. And that's the kind of audience that I'm trying to get to. But I would just say to you, put yourself out there. It's going to be scary. I was scared coming up here tonight. I mean, I'm buzzing now because the room of you is absolutely phenomenal, right? But, you know, just put yourself out there. Just do it. And as I say, considering all these different things, not getting bogged down in the minutiae about, is it React, is it Vue.js, is it this? Notice on my diagram, I'm not talking about technologies. I'm talking about parts of a solution. A lot of people get bogged down in the specifics. They would draw a diagram like this and they would say React. They would say C#, or they might say something like that. Don't do that. You just constrain your thinking and you end up, you get caught in a debate with someone talking about, well, I don't want it to be React, I want it to be Vue.js. You spend half an hour arguing about that and you're no further along your solution of actually what is it we're building. And that, as I would say, for any of you that want to develop your career up the stack or up to, not up the stack, up the career ladder, whatever you want to say. Clearly I'm talking in stacks too much. That is the bit of advice I would give you, is actually if you can really take a zoom out and not focus on the technical details, but you can actually just look at a solution, it'll skyrocket your career. And also, just for me, it's more fun. You're looking at a solution. You don't need to worry about the specifics. So that probably leads me nicely on to the next point. What am I doing for time? Am I okay? I don't know. Jamie literally stepped out. That means I'm fine. I've got another 10 minutes. It's fine. So on this, I take it most of you know front-end, back-end database. Does everyone know what an ORM is? Show of hands. Yeah, okay. So an ORM is an object relational mapper, right? So again, used one of these at a fantastic company. But an ORM basically is a programmatic way to develop a database. So a lot of you will probably do a database in your university projects and you'll write raw SQL. How long have I got? Fine, there you go. That's how good it's going. So that's everyone's going to be here sleeping, by the way, because I'll talk for another hour. No, but an ORM, object relational mapper. So a lot of you probably, now I don't really ever work with MongoDB, to be honest. Whereas Aaron was in this afternoon before he's doing the talk on the MongoDB support. I thought, flipping hell, man, that's dedication. But I deal with SQL mostly, Postgres. We've obviously had a leaver already. It's not the type of talk for that person. But an ORM basically allows you to programmatically develop a database. You don't have to write raw SQL. You can introspect the database. So if you've got an existing database, you can fire an ORM at it. And basically what that will do is it will create a programmatic structure of that database. And it'll basically tell you, for example, as I come back to my cars example, you might have cars, wheels, tires, all the rest of it. You can introspect the database, it will create objects, and then you can write queries in your coding language of choice. So for JavaScript, a lot of the most common ORMs is Prisma. You get things like Sequelize, you get, I think C# was link queries. And basically you can, say again, no, go for it.
Entity framework. Entity
framework, that's the one, thank you. I knew, what's the link framework? The link is like, is the link, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like LINQ. LINQ, thank you. Yeah, that's it. I'm calling it Link. Yeah, no, entity framework, that's the one. Thank you very much. But basically, these make your life easier, so you don't have raw SQL in your applications, right? Again, a lot of people don't know about these, so they'll write raw SQL, they'll send a request, they'll fire and forget, they won't have any workflow management, it will send it out to a string SQL statement that doesn't escape the characters, does none of this, it's super insecure. Something goes wrong, and then they go, shit, how do I fix this? Because there's no way to trace it. Whenever you add in these ORMs, it makes it a lot simpler to work with the data types that you've got. How many of you have used, genuinely, not just like you've, in the nicest way possible, not just you could do this, but you've maybe done more than, say, deployed a Docker image to the cloud? Show of hands. Who's got a lot of experience in the cloud? Right, so like far less, right? Get experience in the cloud. Go do something with it. Go use DigitalOcean. Go use Firebase. Go get the free tokens you get on Azure and AWS. You know, everyone, like loads of people, like you might not come up and talk to me now because I've said it, but quite often when I give talks like this, people come up and say, but how do you do that? How do you get the experience with this? And then I'll ask the question of, how many of you actually done stuff with cloud? And they'll get like 5 hands up. I'm like, well, there's your problem. Go do it. There's nothing stopping you. Go build a basket app, you know, build like something that you've got a passion for, build a diary, whatever it may be, but build it out as if it's a project. Give yourself deadlines, run sprints, put in requirements. You can ask GPT for a fake problem to solve. That's a really good way of doing it. Give you a business requirement and tell it to be annoying, you know, tell it like, I've only got 2-week deadline, my boss has told me to do 6 weeks worth of work. That'll give you a realistic experience, right? So do that though, but like genuinely do that and like and get the feedback, like experience it. One of the best things I've done, I mean, I used to build my own websites. I've done like web development and little web design projects. And I used to deploy it on Firebase, and I've done a little bit with DigitalOcean. I cannot remember the other, Netlify as well. They were all like sort of entry level sort of way into cloud if you're looking for that type of thing. I would recommend Azure above AWS. I love Azure. I go to AWS, I just can't find anything in it. It's all just higgledy-piggledy all over the place. Azure's got a really nice structure, so if you're trying to get to grips with cloud computing, I would recommend you use Azure. Get the free credits, play about with it, just see how you can go. And hopefully the next time you're at a talk and someone says, have you done cloud, and everyone raises your hand, you've just totally made yourself stand out from the crowd, because there was about 6 people, I think, or something like that put their hands up here. So hopefully that's another nice point. Again, I've mentioned on security, I bet you a lot of you don't consider security whenever you're developing apps, beyond maybe like the basics of like, you know, you put a password in front of it. Hopefully you're not doing like an MD5 password. You've maybe used something like bcrypt at least, or you're using JWT, something of significance, but the different levels of it, right? Again, look at the security stuff. Maybe do some of the, I think it's, I'm going to butcher this, but the OSINT stuff, you know, like look at things like dependable CVEs. Familiarize yourself with all these things. I can't remember. I think CVEs, it's like critical vulnerabilities and something. Someone else can tell me the E, what that stands for. But these are all parts of a stack, of a full stack application, of a product that no one thinks about. And we all focus on doing, I know my React, I know my TypeScript, I know my database. And then they get thrust into the real world and they start working on a project, and then they go, oh my God, I've got to do this. I've got to do ORM, I've got to do cloud security, requirements gathering, team management. Oh my God, how do I do this? So what I'm trying to tell you is, I wish someone told me about this 5 years ago, because I've had to learn the hard way by getting thrust into the deep end, and I love that. Like, this is why I love this type of thing. It gets my adrenaline going, right? And it's like, it's a nice way to do it. But I would say to you, really familiarize yourself with it. I've kind of alluded to it with GPT, but again, quick show of hands, how many of you have actually been involved in requirements gathering? I know it sounds a bit dry, so that's a decent number of people in the room right now. See the people that haven't done requirements gathering, what I would really encourage all of you to do when you're in your work in the next couple of days is ask people in your team if you can shadow them. It's one of the most valuable skills. I talked about whiteboarding, right? If you can do requirements gathering and you can convert that to a whiteboard, and you've got the full stack understanding to say, this is how we need to build the front end, here's the back end, in the database, I swear to God that you are absolutely miles ahead of the competition. And it's also a really fun space to be in. That's why I love it. I feel very fortunate that I got to work on solution architecture and then doing technical product. And I love it. You get yourself into a position where you get to collaborate with every person in the business, and it's phenomenal. Your days are just like, never one day is the same. And the final one I'll talk about is team management. Now, it's not maybe relevant for full stack experience. It's more kind of coming into the product realm, the management side of things. But again, a lot of you might be sitting here, I don't know, you might not want to. You might want to do team management. It might not be your thing. It's okay if it's not. But if it is your thing, and you might be thinking to yourself, how do I get to that next stage? Just ask. Just ask. Just try and do it. Offer yourself up. If there's, maybe you're not going to get to run a product or a solution, but when there's a nice big feature coming up, something that you're maybe passionate about, I'll give you an example. One of the companies I was at, I was only there for about, I think 4 months, and I referenced that MD5 and bcrypt for a reason. Their passwords were still MD5 hashes that were like the old version of MD5. They were all like not collision resistant. They were easily just rainbow mapped out. They're just absolute sham. And they were talking about making it bcrypt, which, if any don't know what bcrypt is, it's like it's just a different hashing algorithm that you can change the number of iterations, and it's supposedly future-proof, right? But there was loads of people on the team that were far more experienced than me. But I just said, well, I'd love to do that. And to my surprise, they went, right, on you go, no bother. And I got to change the entire security premise around this system, and I've been there for 4 months. But a lot of people would be afraid to ask that. And what the point I'm making to you is, if you give yourself familiarised with all these things, when that opportunity comes up, you can grab it with both hands. But you can't grab those opportunities. And people will come and say to me, but why am I not getting an opportunity? And as I say, how many have you done cloud? And 5 people got that. So if you can familiarise yourself with these things, put yourself in that position, you then get to be the person that builds the full stack, that builds the product, that builds the solution out. And I just think that's a phenomenal place to be. Things I wish I did sooner, to be honest. I've talked a little bit about this. I just want to check where I'm at with this, because I'm just so I rattle through the end of this. Workflow management I've spoke about, really that's the temporal thing. Testing frameworks I'll give a 2-second on. I know you'll be sick of hearing this. Put the testing framework in from day dot. I don't know, again, if you're all doing that. I'm expecting people to be doing TDD, maybe even BDD if you're into it. But get the testing framework in place. Whenever you get too long into it and you've not got the testing, it's an absolute nightmare to add it back in. And when I come to the very end of this slide, which I'm nearly there, you'll understand why this becomes very important. Automated workflows, I'm really referencing your GitHub releases or your release strategies so that it's fully automated. Again, maybe that's a separate topic for another day. Team management, assigning specific roles to people. Whenever you're in a team and you are maybe the front-end developer, the back-end developer, you need to have someone that says specifically, I expect this from you, I expect that from you. If you don't do that, your team is going to become very higgledy-piggledy and not know what to do. I can see people moving about, so I think I'm going to try and go through to the end of this quickly. I'll skip over release. Product experience, I'll go very quickly. Product experience, for me, is the epitome of full stack development. It's the zooming out. You go from zooming out from one end of it, you then fill out to full stack, then you zoom out to solutions where you do your whiteboards and your cloud architecture and your security. And then you take a view out again and you start building products where all of that stuff is drilled down. Now, I've been very fortunate to get to the point of being able to do this, and I think it's genuinely one of the most exciting jobs ever. Now, what I would say to all of you is when you get to the position where you're trying to run a product team and they don't have tests in the system, and so if something breaks, and I give the example of the Ferrari or the Range Rover, if you don't have tests in place and you cannot fix that, it's the most frustrating thing ever, because there's not an easy way for you to get what your clients want, essentially. Now, all of this is to say, and I hope you can see a little bit of the journey I'm trying to talk through. Starting out from full stack development, if you follow those, how would I say, those standards that I'm talking about, familiarise yourself with all these things. I'm hoping from the room, because everyone is sitting quite still, right? I'm hoping that some of you have learned something from this. I'm hoping that some of the technology that I've mentioned is something new to you, something that you can actually go learn about or implement in your work. And really ultimately get you towards product and product experience, and so that you're not focused on the wrong things, such as naming variables, worrying about the colors you use, but in fact getting to build real solutions for people in the real world and actually getting to really have an impact out there. So I think I've ran over a little bit. I hope that was interesting for everyone, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was great. I think what you said there at the end, it's so valuable, like knowing what you're doing in service of.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of definition. I've been in a lot of meetings where you sort of talk about things, you go back and forth, and then you're like, why actually are we doing this?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes the answer is, well, I don't know, was this from a requirement, or where is it just an idea that one of us had? I don't know. So that's great. Give chance for questions from the audience. Before you do that, you mentioned Netlify, and I'm just going to plug Edinburgh.js in February has Phil from Netlify coming to speak to us, which is a great thing. Yep. So he's going to talk all about Netlify and serverless and the pipeline. So if you're interested in learning more about the cloud, come through to Edinburgh in February. You'll find all the information on the Edinburgh.js group. Does anybody have any questions for Ryan about his talk or like learning full stack?
I'll be disappointed if I don't get at least one question.
So don't disappoint the guy.
Joe, what we got?
Joe, can I give you the mic for the live stream? Cheers.
Thank you for sharing. And I'd like to ask how do you balance your attention about the developing and the product?
So how do you balance the attention between product and development?
Yeah. Thank you.
You mean basically how do you prioritize whether to do the development efforts or the product efforts? Maybe a wee bit clarification, Joe?
Yeah. It's a balance about the product design or product manager and the coding and the developing stuff. Thank you.
Good question. So that's something that I actually struggled with at the beginning. Because I came from a technical background, when I was getting involved in tech, now I'm not a full-on product manager, I'm a technical product engineer, really, to be honest. Now, at first, you want to focus on everything being the technical solution. But again, Jamie made a fantastic point there. It has to be driven by the business requirements. It has to be driven by what are the customers wanting. So I mentioned as well about scalability there at the beginning. If you've got 100 customers and you've got a development task where you know you could make it work for 10 million customers and it's going to take you 6 months, and all of us would sit and go, that's the best bit of engineering I've ever seen, right? What's the point? No one's going to pay for it, right? Seriously, and you'd all sit and go, I've done that, it's fantastic. It's irrelevant. If you've got 100 customers, what do those 100 customers want? What provides them the most value? What provides you with, monthly recurring revenue, annual recurring revenue, more sales, more interest, whatever it is you're basing your product, success on? That has to be the driver. But as technical people, that's something that we often forget because we're focused, as I say, on I want to use React, I want to use Vue, I want to use that. So that was what I would say is really understand your end user, your customer, what is success to you, and suddenly when you understand that, it becomes very clear where you have to put your efforts. I think you had a question. It's my only 2 questions, so we'll go for it. We're not wasting too much time.
Yeah, so my thing is coming from a generalist perspective. Yes. So for me, at least, I'll give you an example. So for me, there was a business who asked for, they had to create an MVP within a short time, right? So I went with Flutter. And, I got their business requirement, and Flutter and Firebase sound perfect to me. And it, was working. All the requirements were sitting within the, the feature restrictions of Firebase and Flutter, right? But later on, during the development, there was addition of the feature like the background location should be automatically turned on, which is a kind of a bit hassle for the Flutter. And for example, we had to suggest random users. So the fetching of random users from date from the documents wasn't a feature which was provided by Firebase. So on one side we talk, okay, be a generalist, but to figure out these shortcomings, you have to be some kind of, expert. So how do you balance that?
So if you were to talk about, let's think of, I seem to use not a car references. Think about an F1 team. You've got the manager of the team. He knows when something's broken, but he doesn't actually have to fix it himself. He's got a mechanic that fixes it. So the job of a generalist isn't to be the expert on everything. You quite often choose one or the other. You either become an individual contributor that's seriously expert in something, or you become a generalist. So in that example, what I would be saying is, well, if I was the generalist, which I would be in the situation you've given, I'd be looking at your example and going, right, okay, we obviously need to change the dynamics. I'm going to pull in one of the people in the team that's an expert in that. I'm going to explain the problem. The communication is obviously super important. I'm going to express the problem, let them understand the definition of done, give them the clear roles as I mentioned, let them figure it out and trust in them to figure it out, because that's something that's very difficult to let go of. Let them figure it out and come back to me, and then I can communicate that outwards. But you don't have to know everything. You will all know more about loads of things than me. It doesn't matter, because I can understand it enough so that I can have a conversation with you. But it's nothing to feel bad about. You shouldn't feel intimidated by the fact that you're not the expert in it. You can't be the expert in everything. And the minute you realise that is actually where you sort of unlock your potential, because you've not held back by limiting beliefs, essentially. I don't know if that's a good answer or if it's just a motivational one, but I genuinely do believe that. Cool, right, I'm going to sit down before Jamie knocks me out. Thank you very much.
Good, cool. Every round of applause for Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. What we're going to do now is we're going to take, I always say like 3 minutes, but it ends up being 5. So 5-minute breaks just so you can fetch yourself a new drink or like go to the bathroom if you want. And then we'll be back with Daniel with the lightning talk. So if you could be reasonably prompt and not sort of dilly-dally, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Good. I've just made a slide.
Okay, hey everybody, we're back. We've got 2 more talks, one of which is a lightning talk. Daniel's been very helpful in helping with tonight, also a co-host and in fact original host, and in fact the very first person we ever had speaking at Edinburgh.js when we started again. So he's going to talk about a product that he is launching tonight in a few minutes, with a live coding demo maybe.
A few minutes.
Yeah.
5, 10 minutes. Let's see. So I think if you go over 10 minutes on a lightning talk, that's officially bad manners. So if I go over 10, just start booing. And then, I know. If I make it under 5, everyone just get up and start cheering like wild. I'm going to do 2 parts to this 5-minute talk, so that's 2.5 minutes each. So part 1 is story time, and then part 2 is live coding demo. So in 2020, come with me if you will, to my living room in the south side of Glasgow, and I'm working inside of a cupboard because I needed to convert something into an office. And I'm working on a product with a friend. We're building this startup. And his idea is there's these people selling stuff on Amazon. And little known fact is you have to pay money to have your products appear on like the Amazon page. So you don't get that for free. There's a reason why Bezos has so much cash. And that's one of them. So his idea was if we get lots of data about these products, we can optimize how they place their bid to appear on that page. And so I started hacking away at a product, pull in lots of data, started to build a rules engine, something that would analyze all this data, and then automatically adjust the bid for placement on the Amazon search page. And this all went really great. I think Ryan mentioned like DigitalOcean. We had a $5 droplet, which was running a Node server and our Postgres database. Now that got much more expensive very quickly. And at a certain point, when you're analyzing data that's transacting hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of e-commerce transactions, things started to topple over. And so I looked at my indie hack with Postgres and Node and thought, I think it's time we need to do horizontal scaling. You can only add so much RAM, you can only add so much of this. So that was when I made my first like really serious trip into serverless. And the calculation went a bit like this. We're going to stop shipping so fast, and it's going to take us like 4 developers rather than 1 to do this. And so I was just mesmerized by this. Now, if you're not familiar with serverless, this is kind of the idea. You're used to writing software here, and then you put that software on a server somewhere here, and then it runs. Now, with serverless, it's a little bit different. Your software, which is composed of lots of different functions, is now each function is running on its own kind of quasi-server. And so rather than having one server that you create and software you put onto it, you now have multiple services. And so there's 2 parts to this job. One is like creating infrastructure, and the other part is writing the software that goes on that infrastructure. But it all kind of works together to build this application. This is sort of distributed programming. And the paradigm in itself was a shift, but just seeing the state of the developer experience really gave me pause for thought. So that was when I thought about notation. How does a small team like us be able to do scalable software, something that can scale up and down really easily? The pricing's designed for that, but without getting stuck in this kind of cloud infrastructure bureaucracy. So I'm going to copy this command. And what I should have done is I should have done install before I started the story. So I'm going to stick a P in front of that because PNPM will be quicker than NPM. In fact, forget it. Here's one I prepared earlier. So let's see how much space we've got on the screen here. So I'll just pop the terminal out of the way. So the first thing you'll notice about a notation project is there's 2 folders, one for infrastructure and one for your runtime code. Now, you'll see that my infrastructure module here, which is representing an API gateway, is importing a Lambda function. Lambda is the kind of serverless function you have on AWS from the runtime folder. And so unlike maybe you've written some serverless applications before, you've written some YAML to describe your infrastructure, or you maybe use something like Terraform and use their kind of domain-specific language. Here you're writing in JavaScript, but also they're kind of living in the same space. So it's not over on one side of my code base, I've got the infrastructure, another side I've got the runtime. They're there. And actually I can click through into my functions so that in the same type space, there's interoperability between them. So let's see what this is actually doing. So I think one of the challenges I faced when I was starting to learn how to use tools like AWS is like huge amounts of documentation, and I just want to write some code and like view source. So that was the first thing I really wanted to do. So we can generate a little graph of this infrastructure. And here we can see that for what was ostensibly quite a simple application, create an API, we add an API route. For this to work on AWS, there's quite a lot of resources I need to create. So I need to like add permissions and IAM roles and stages for things, not to mention dealing with uploading the zip file of my source code and so on. So if you want to learn AWS, notation's a great way to actually learn how its model will work. Write code that makes sense and then see what it compiles to. Okay, let's see if we can just deploy this application. Now, I've got my AWS credentials already set up, so we can deploy this, and that's going to start deploying it. And let's see if we can run a dashboard just to see what's happening with this deployment at the same time. So we'll see here that, bump the size up a bit, as the provisioner is deploying this stuff, we can see them appearing, and I'm not super into like dashboards generally, but it is quite handy to have something that's going to take me through to the AWS console when I need to. And if you've used AWS, you know the console's quite big and it's very easy to get lost in there. So it's pretty handy that I can just click through into AWS and see what it's created. And I'm not logged in, so this is not going to work. But we'll go back to here. But what is handy is that I've got I've got the URL of the API I've just deployed. So let's see if it's there. It's not found. Now, why is it not found? If you look at our infrastructure code, you'll see that I've mounted a, this is where I'm going to get really confused by the two different same pronunciations of the word root. The root, this is much more difficult in a British accent, isn't it? So I've mounted a root on my router here for greeting, but here is the root, or as we should just do what the Americans do. On the route, here we are. I've just completely lost my semantic ability with this kind of strange, basically, I'm on the wrong URL. So let's see if we can't fix that. So now what is kind of annoying is like you're always hitting deploy, and like the whole iteration process can be super slow when you're doing cloud and serverless. So I'm going to run a process called watch. And my watcher is going to watch what changes I make to my code and then hopefully pick them up, and it's going to hot module reload the infrastructure. So if I change this path now to here we go again, the root route, we'll see that it's picked up that change and it's kind of done a quick like, destroy and create. And if I refresh that, we've now got hello world. So it's deployed that pretty instantly. And let's just make this a bit more fun. Hello GlasgowJS. Is that like a kind of mic drop emoji? No, let's just stop way on top. Okay, so deploy. Right, I'm going to just call it there because how am I doing time? Did it hit 10 minutes?
I haven't been tracking, sorry.
I didn't hear anyone boo, so I'm going to take that as a victory. And please do connect. So this is like really early stage, and what I'm doing at the moment is just trying to get this kind of new model out there and see what people think and how they want to if this would help them on their journey interacting with the cloud and building software on it. So you can find me, danielgrant.co. got my Twitter and my LinkedIn there. Please connect. I'm up for connections. Love to chat. And also, if you'd like to kind of just follow along with notation, don't use it for production software yet. Give it a few weeks. Got some things to iron out. But go along there, and if you go to the website, down at the bottom, there's a bunch of links. You can join Discord, you can start the GitHub repo, you can join the mailing list, follow on Twitter. So thank you so much. Cheers.
Cool. That's great. Thank you. Since that was a lightning talk, I will leave questions for socializing afterwards.
Absolutely.
And you are talking next week at Edinburgh.js, so if you want to know more, come along then. So Edinburgh.js is running on Tuesday. You can go to the meetup.com/Edinburgh.js for more details. And Doro, who's at the back there, he's waving if everybody looks, we'll be talking about accessibility as well, which is a great topic for all developers to know about. So please do come along to that. This is your laptop, so we don't need to replug. Brilliant. So now we have the final talk for the evening. James is going to talk about building and selling a product. Cheers.
Making a product look bad and get paid for it. Another name was DDoS, a product, and get paid for it. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. It's I first went to GlasgowJS in 2017, first week of Code Clan that I was doing, and Daniel was doing a talk there, so it's kind of nice to be the person up here presenting, and quite nerve-wracking, but hopefully you'll find this interesting. If you've ever seen the meme of the soldiers lining up about to go in somewhere and there's a clown standing with them, this is the presentation that you're going to have. We're not going to be looking at, hardcore code type things. This is kind of talking about building a product, selling it and deploying it, and kind of some of the lessons that you learn along the way. So just the structure of the talk is like, who am I? Why listen to me? What was the problem we identified? What was the solution that I went for? And what was the process of actually getting cash in my bank account from it? I have a video in here that might not work because I might not be on the Wi-Fi, so that might get one slide less. So I'm originally from Shetland Islands. I was a politics graduate, worked for an MP, was a lobbyist, did a career change into Code Clan, which sadly no longer with us, but I think was a great thing for tech scene in Scotland. I've been coding for 6 years now. I'm a lead engineer managing 5 devs. Stay away from management if you want to stay sane. I also contract for the BBC in my spare time, and it's kind of an interesting story about that. When I was about a year and a half of coding experience, I volunteered to speak at the Vue.js Glasgow event, and it was at the BBC, and it was probably not my best presentation, but off the back of that, I managed to get this hookup. They came in and said, like, oh, we'd like to work with you. You've got a background in politics. We've got this politics app we're building. Kind of touching on what Ryan was saying, put yourself out there. You never know who's sitting in the crowd listening and they want to know more about you. Before you know it, opportunities will present themselves for you. Also founded a couple of charities. I really like doing stuff outside of work. And my wife and I ran a cafe during COVID. Wouldn't recommend it. So, the problem. Shetland, where I'm from, it sits hundreds of miles north of Scotland. I'm going there this week and probably won't get to go there because it's so snowy right now, I won't be able to leave. So one of my other options, if I can't fly, is to take this ferry in that kind of weather from Aberdeen to Shetland. 14 hours overnight. It's rough. And one of the things that they quite helpfully do, because tourism is an important part of our economy, is they let you book cabins that you can take pets in. So if you're going around Scotland, you're doing a staycation, for some reason you want to spend money going to Shetland, you can book a pet cabin and you have your dog in the cabin with you. My brother sent me this WhatsApp exchange in the middle of 2022 saying, the system sucks. When we try and book something for my dog, it's a laborious pain in the arse to do, and I wish there was a way to do it better. And that to a dev is like, oh, here we go. Right, what can I do to make this better? So here's an example. Now, hopefully this video will play. So let me take it right back to the start there. The first thing you see on the Northlink site, the only options you get to choose is how many people are traveling, what's the route, what are my dates, and if I've got a vehicle or not. And this begins the painful journey. So you click book, and you arrive on this page, and they're doing some kind of await loop here that stops these 6 different things from loading in. So, and I can't click continue until I've selected 2 dates, and all 6 of them have loaded in. And I know it's kind of boring watching it, but this is what people in Shetland had to deal with. The people trying to travel to Shetland. Great. I want to travel up to Shetland in those days, and I want a pet cabin. So let me pick my pet cabin on this next page. Right, let me look. Okay, I don't see pet cabin. I can't see, I can't find my pet cabin. That's fine. That's, you know, it's close to Christmas. It's probably booked up. Let's go back to this screen. God damn. So now I'm going to pick the 21st of December. Anyway, I won't play the rest of the video. You get the point. I actually sent this to the company and said, this is crap. We can do better than this, can we not? So, solution. So what I wanted to do when I went on the site is I wanted to start looking through the network tab to see what actual information do they expose and what can I kind of hijack and take advantage of. Now, there's the first thing we see there is a create. When I make a booking, there's a create endpoint. And lo and behold, there's a payload. So first thing you do, you load up Postman or some other tool that you're using for making requests, and you start seeing what can I actually get from this. So made a request in Northlink's site. PHP, anyone like PHP? I do. I built a backend in Laravel and just started writing commands. So let's start fetching. I need a token to interact with their API. And one of the things that was kind of interesting doing this is, you know, Ryan spoke about GraphQL, only exposing exactly what you need, no more. Northlink ferries were not doing that. This API, if you look at the size of these arrays, 335 on one side, and every single entry has 193 different dates. And I would say 90% of it is complete bunk. But for me, trying to scrape their API and steal it, this is exactly what you want when you're doing something like this. So I'm able to get all the dates that they have open for booking. I'm able to get all of the accommodation and the cabins and stuff that they have. So I started setting up jobs to make these mock, not bookings, but mock like information requests. Get the token. What if I'm traveling with one car? What if I'm traveling with two passengers? What if I'm traveling from Shetland to Aberdeen or Shetland to Orkney? Get it in a database in a format that I can start playing about with. So you scrape the site once, you've got all the data, and all of this. Sorry, where's it going? I need to adjust your mic from here to here. We good? All this information is, I just stored everything they gave me. So I can see that, you know, they've got 13 of these sleeping pods on this night, 29 of the other. And you might wonder, like, well, what's the point? Like, you know, pet cabin, yeah, whatever. But what about people who've got accessibility needs? You know, we've got, on this ferry, there's cabins that are specifically kitted out for people who might have wheelchairs or mobility needs. It's impossible for them to find something good as well. So it's not, you know, it's not just like a novelty so that people can take their dogs to Shetland more easily. There's a real point of gathering the information. They had all this information. They were exposing it to the customer, and they were never, you know, they were never actually, it was so hard to find, as per the video. So Ryan said in his presentation about not being particular about the stack. I might say something different here, just that for me, the interest in this was not building the perfect web app. And sometimes you'll build apps that are imperfect. You pick something that you're familiar with. I've worked with Vue and Laravel for 5 years now, and SQL I knew anyway. So to build this app, I just have a Vue template. I just copy and paste it, a Vue and Laravel stack, and I start building. Because the purpose of this app was just to kind of shame them into being better. The purpose of this app was not to win some kind of engineering competition. Vue 3, Tailwind was my CSS. And then, you know, again, like what Ryan was saying at the start, if you're unfamiliar with something, try it. Just try something. I was totally unfamiliar with deployments. I don't do any DevOps at work or anything. So I thought, well, why not? Let's figure it out. There's an answer. People do it. So let's figure out how to do it. So I used AWS, and I used a layer. I guess it's kind of similar to the stuff that Daniel was talking about, called Laravel Forge, which just let me, you know, run commands and stuff from there. So it ended up with a site that kind of looked like this. So again, it's quite stark. It's quite simple, but it gave me enough to be able to send screenshots, send videos to the company to kind of say, hey, this is how much better it could be, and this is not even, like, you know, well designed or whatever. It's just like a Tailwind Vue template that I use. And I just wanted to think, like, here's 3 examples of things people might want to find. You know, when can I get a specific type of room? For example, if I need an accessible room, when can I get my car? And, you know, pet cabin, you know, for my brother who was messaging me. So it ended up looking a bit like this. Now, the calendar on the right is to kind of show them just how simple this could be. This information you already have. You're exposing it in your API. So the red dot tells me I can't take my pet on the boat that day, and the yellow one, the green one tells me I can. And I built it with this kind of calendar style component. So if you think back to the start of the presentation when we watched that painful 6 things coming in, this is it, just like right here. And a lot of these companies, like no one's ever really, Northlink doesn't have a CTO who's going to go, oh, we can improve the website. They outsource these things. They don't really think necessarily about this. Here's like one that showed, they didn't take this one on, but it shows all the prices so you could find the cheapest time to travel, for example. When they built their version, they didn't have this, but I thought, again, like, for people, like, Shetlanders are not any richer than anyone else in Scotland. In fact, they've got that burden of getting off the island, 130 quid to get off the island, so why not show them the kind of cheapest options? So that video, again, this video, I sent it to the company as well. Never heard back from them at that point originally. So this GlasgowJS, this is not James Stewart talks about himself. So here's a bit of code. Now, Tailwind, if anyone hasn't seen it before, is this kind of approach to, I guess, masking a lot of your CSS with these class names. I would not recommend it if you're still learning CSS, in the same way that I wouldn't recommend Vue or React if you're still learning JavaScript. You've got to learn the basics first. But what I really liked about Tailwind is, adding dark mode to the site was as simple as kind of adding these dark classes in here. And I felt like it kind of enforces a lot of good practices, because this component on the right was a container that I wrote about 3 times before I decided, hang on, why am I not just making a component called container and doing it? Because frankly, the template, the CSS ends up looking a bit ugly with all these classes on it. So it kind of forces you into componentizing a bit clever. And I would say I would probably use Tailwind like for every time I'm doing a project now. And it's definitely worth exploring, but it does have its critics, because it's masking a lot of the logic that's going on. And if you're experienced with CSS, it's really nice to use. I'd recommend giving it a go. But don't dive into it if you're still learning, because it might just muddy the waters a bit. I also used a thing with this called inertia.js. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this before. I don't know how widely adopted it is. On the top, you've got like a Laravel root, and if I was doing this at my job, that would be in a class, and it would be a lot neater. But just for the purposes of demonstrating this, we've got a root called /pets, which renders a Vue component called pet cabin availability. And I made this system where, because I was scraping data, and sometimes it was about 3,000 different data pieces I was scraping every 15 minutes, hence the DDoS. I wanted users on the site to be able to say, oh, this data is being pulled right now. I wanted to show like a spinner to sit, so the user knows this is going to be updated soon. So I started passing these like job statuses, and what it does is it injects it into this, which looks horrendous when you just look at it in the inspector like that, but it gives you access to a whole bunch of variables that you can access anywhere up and down the chain. I know that it is everyone would probably agree that in component-based frameworks like React and Vue, they'd say prop drilling is bad, right? So parent component right down to the child component, you're passing stuff down, you're emitting stuff up the chain. Everyone agrees it's bad. I've never worked in a code base that doesn't have it. So one of the things that inertia.js kind of solves is, at any point in the chain, I can just use this use page, which reads from the big blob there as an object, and it lets me access it anywhere. I don't need to worry about state stores. I don't need no Vuex, no Redux, or whatever the latest shiny thing is. You just access it wherever. I found it to be a lot faster than just using traditional Vue type stuff. It's kind of like an alternative to REST APIs, because you just get the data on the page immediately. And another thing I wanted to touch on with part of the building of this was, I said I wasn't very good at cloud, and I used a thing called Laravel Forge. I don't know if it's just for Laravel. I think you can do Node.js apps on it as well. But I hosted a bunch of sites on here, and it just made it really easy for like managing environment variables, for setting up recurring jobs. So inside of this bit, I would build my jobs. Now, the route from Shetland to Aberdeen, there's 8 different routes, and I decided to scrape them every 15 minutes. And each route was reading 335 dates. So people were complaining on the local Facebook page that the Northlink Ferry site was down. And they never found out. Unless they're watching this, then I'm screwed. Get poorly paid. I hope that the poorly paid part of this will serve as a lesson to you to believe in yourself more than I clearly did when I went for this. I didn't go into this expecting to be paid, to be quite honest. It's a nice benefit to get it out the side of it. But I probably should have asked for more, and we'll get to what it was down the line. So how I started, you don't need to read all the text, you can if you want, but it's all cut off. How I started, my kind of strategy for trying to shame this company into betterment was to first email the local news instead of the company. So I said, hey, I'm going to do this. Can you like get this campaign ready in case they decide to not email back to me? And that was in, I guess that was in October that I first reached out, and I sent them some details. And by that point, I had the site live so that people could use it. And then I emailed Northlink later in October and never heard back from them for a couple of months. And just as we were getting ready to pull the trigger on the story, you know, like sort of sad person looking at a computer like, I didn't get paid. Then they finally got back to me. And what followed, so that was in December 2022. What followed was what I can only describe as like months of negotiation. I'd be on calls with, like this company that runs Northlink, Serco, is enormous. It's one of those like G4S style things that own everything. And so trying to get money out of these guys proved to be quite tricky because they really love the idea. Oh, they're fawning over the idea, but we need to speak to Jim in finance, and then he needs to take it to this board, and they need to go in this meeting, and then we need to bring in our web developers to speak to you about how we can like port this onto our website and stuff. So one thing I would say is if you're ever mimicking this behavior and shaming a corporation, you might run up against some difficulty with trying to get answers. It wasn't through until I think it wasn't through until a year later that the money actually landed in my bank account from everything, even though they said in December 2022, this is great, we want this on the site now. It took them a year to build a calendar thing, which, you know, I built in a few evenings in my house. So, but the point is, like, utilize your connections. Like, I always had the local media ready to just pounce if they decided to like drag their feet, and these companies don't like to be scared by local media stuff. So launch, my mum was very proud because I got my picture on the local thing. However, they did describe me as a local computer whiz. So that'll be my next T-shirt when I'm doing my next presentation. Yeah, it's nice to, like, you know, I have a lot of time for Shetland. I like the fact that this app actually helped improve people's experiences of traveling to and from Shetland. You know, that even if I wasn't paid for it, it would have been okay. So that was the kind of timeline when I started writing the code, and it all just started as a way, more than anything, to learn how to deploy to the cloud and have a stable app, have a SQL database in production that I can play about with. But it took a year of sitting in meetings every month. Oh yeah, we're coming along. Our web designers are getting on. Can you tell them this and that? And eventually the money got paid into the bank account. So here comes the big reveal. My energy bill's not going to know what hit it this month. And the journalist even said to me, you should have charged them 100 times the amount, which would be small for Serco and the Scottish government. I'm not hardcore capitalist, to be honest. Like, it was nice to get anything, but it's just 500 quid. So that was what it was. That was the kind of their version of it, I guess. They kind of lifted it, and they ended up like building it themselves. And I guess I got a bit of a like sympathy payout. But there was loads of other things I suggested. I built them like a cancellation text. So if you join a queue, if you can't get your car on the boat that night, and I simulate, press this button and look, the text pops up on my phone. It's all good ideas, but I mean, trying to get them to understand that. This was hard enough as it was. I decided to include this because it was kind of where I started losing my mind with the project, where this whole story's been about web scraping. And one of the great things about Northlink is it was a REST API. I could just scrape it and access it. So I thought, right, if I'm going to develop this app and I want it to be this transport information for Shetland, let's include flight data on it. Now, flight data is quite valuable. You've got to pay for it with APIs. So I was looking at Loganair's, the airline that does Shetland. I needed to like scrape this, hit this, and then get the next page and pull the prices, because I'm a dev. I'm not going to pay for stuff. I'm going to get stuff for free if I can. So I started looking into how to do it, and it seemed like within my app, it seemed like the way to do it was to use this thing called JS function, which involved me having a button in a view component that triggered a controller in the back end in Laravel, in PHP, which then had JavaScript executed within the PHP. And at that point, when you're starting to lose your mind a bit, you think it's time to stop. And do you know what's annoying is I got this working locally, but not into production. It just wouldn't work in production no matter what I did. And I think that's it. We're hiring at the company I work for at a Value Agent, if anyone's interested in the head of engineering ops. And one thing to say before I dismount was, when I was coming to these events in 2017, loads of stuff went over my head. In fact, some stuff tonight even went over my head from some of the amazing stuff that Daniel's doing. If anyone is here and they're just starting their career, you're in the right room. You're already doing the right thing by being here. So keep it up, and it's thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thanks so much, James. That's great. One of the key things that I love about being a dev is that you can look at something and you can just play with it a bit. Other people's stuff where you can go, oh, that sucks. I'm going to do it. And I wonder how many things start by people being annoyed.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to start in dev, whenever I'm booking a flight, I look at the disabled fields. Sometimes you get like coupon fields. I'll inspect that and see if there's any values in there. And sometimes it reveals information. So yeah, that's great.
And we all have this desire to build and break things, and it's cool when it does something. But even if I got to the end of this and told you I never deployed it properly, I didn't get paid, you still learn so much when you're doing it. So back to what Ryan says, just do. If you want things to happen, you need to be the person making it happen. No one's going to.
On that note, does anybody have any questions for James about what he's building, or why that PHP at the end? Anybody? Hands up.
Are you a hero to the people of Shetland?
No, I mean, I hope so. I'll ask them. I'll phone the 3 that are there and ask them.
Just wondering, was the 500 quid also, did it come with a ban from Northlink? Are you allowed on the boats? Or?
Do you know, it came with something worth more than 500 quid, which was 3 free returns with a car and a cabin, which is about 700 quid per time. Clearly, I should have asked for more money. So, yeah, one of the things that because I'm involved in hiring at my company, and if we're hiring people, especially kind of more junior or mid, one of the things that we look for is projects that go a little bit beyond React to-do list, or something that tells me they've maybe watched a YouTube video to do that. It's nice to see when people take something that they're passionate about and they build something. You don't have to change the world. This is nothing new because Northlink were able to do it. I wasn't breaking any paradigms, but it's nice to do things that relate to your interests, because you're naturally gonna enjoy it all the more because it's around the stuff that you enjoy at the moment. So, yeah.
Just one more question. See, Laravel and Vue, and I manage in Heaven, obviously, but other PHP JavaScript frameworks don't seem to do as well. What is it with Laravel and Vue?
I think that it might actually be as simple as Evan, you, and Taylor Otwell were friends, so they got Vue in on the ground floor with Laravel really easily. But
so they started off together. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I think that when Laravel was trying to find a framework to easily add in, he took his friend's one, rather than, I guess, because Vue as a framework or as a library, whatever you want to call it, it's not really backed by a company. Trying to get React in, you're negotiating with a corporation, whereas Vue, it's like a guy and a team that run it. So I think that Laravel, just the guy that made Laravel, was just like, we'll just add Vue in because I know this guy, But yeah, I mean, back to what Ryan was saying. Although I used Vue for this, I wanted a quick and dirty result. It doesn't matter what you use. You could use.
I've got serious problems with using it with Angular,
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, when I got to the end of this project, I thought I didn't even need Vue. Why did I use this? Because it was like adding so much overhead. The pages are slower to load than they should be. It could have just been HTML being passed stuff from the back end, like it was, or an APIs. It could have been so much simpler. But we love over-engineering, don't we? So.
Cool. Anyone else?
So why not keep going with it? Why not? There's other islands. I know your connection is Shetland, But I mean,
Are there?
it seems like you just have to scrape Calmac now, and then you've got all the islands. You've got Skyscanner for Scotland.
Skyscanner with an E. This is the island of
Nice,
Skye.
nice.
I think, I mean, with projects like these, I think there comes a point sometimes with them where it's like, I need to get serious with this now. Like, I need to probably start writing unit tests. If people are going to start relying on it in some sense, I probably need to. I think there is, Northlink haven't changed. Like, I scraped the data tonight, which, I agreed I wouldn't, but I did for tonight just so I could get stuff in the database. It's still there for anyone to scrape. God, please don't go and just everyone scrape Northlink tonight. But it's, I mean, I thought about it, like, they haven't really put the cancellation text message in. There is other things you can do, but as per the first slide, I'm quite busy with the various other things, and I don't have time to finish it, and I got a bit bored, hence the JS in PHP and madness. So cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So that wraps us up for tonight. Just a couple of programming notes. So we've got Edinburgh.js next week. The next GlasgowJS event, I have not announced it yet, meetup yet. It will likely be a social on the Tuesday, 13th of February. So check the meetup group for the announcements for that. Just a little sort of open offer. If anybody goes away from tonight and is inspired by something and does a side project and writes a blog post about it on their website, send that to me. I'd love to share it with the community. I'm happy to help promote the stuff that people do, even if it's just like a little kind of, tinkering in a web page or whatever. Please do that. The more, the better. If you've got any feedback about the event, email me what you want to see, things we could improve. And thank you for coming tonight. Been a great audience. Cheers.